Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
You mean an institution? A madhouse?
You just found the marble in the oatmeal. You're a lucky, lucky, lucky little boy. Do you know why? You get to drink from the fire hose! Okay, you ready? Open wide! I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Hey, you want to see crazy?
You really are crazy.
I don't get it, Doc. I mean, how can all this be happening? It's like we're in hell or something.
No, it's Hill Valley, although I can't imagine hell being much worse.
Now you want to get nuts? Shut up, you freak! Come on! I say shut up! It's a madhouse! A madhouse!
Hugh.
Hello and welcome to Movie Madhouse, a podcast about movies lost to the annals of time. And this week is an exception. I'm Travis Fishburne.
I'm Alex Brunel.
And yes, this week we are covering the, I would say, classic 1982 film that I had not ever seen before, The Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal has been one of my favorite films since I was a very small child, for a lot of reasons that I will get into. And it's one of those things where, you know, it's always baffling to me because it was, for a long time, it was baffling to me because it was so much a part of my childhood, and then there were people who hadn't seen it, such as you, and I've met others since. Mm-hmm. There were others like you, Travis. But what did you think? Your first time seeing Dark Crystal 40 years almost after its debut.
Yeah, almost 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great watch. It's slower in some parts than in others. I have seen Labyrinth.
Okay.
But the thing is, both of these movies, like Labyrinth, I saw like in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So similar situation here. However, I did really like this movie more than Labyrinth, I would say. As much as I love David Bowie, I think I like this movie more. It's just, I mean, you know, we'll talk about it. All the visuals just work so well.
Yeah.
Just crafted really impeccably. And we'll also get into this, but I mean, it was being made at the same time as the original Star Wars trilogy. Mm-hmm. And there are things in here that look and feel very familiar.
And there's reasons and there's reasons and personnel for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree. I actually do also like this movie better than Labyrinth. I think it has to do with the with the completeness of the world. Like, we'll get into this too, and I'll bring this book back again. But this is this book, The World of the Dark Crystal, published in 1982. It's been reprinted a couple times since. This is a copy of the original 1982 edition. And it's illustrations by Brian Frood, who designed the film, which we'll talk about, with quote-unquote interpretation by J.J. Llewellyn. And it's the whole history of the world.
Wow.
And this was published simultaneously with the film. So, like, all of this world existed far beyond what landed on the screen and would later get expounded upon.
Yeah, that's great.
So you can really feel that. With Dark Crystal, and there's a lot of that in Labyrinth too, but the fact that there are no human characters in Dark Crystal really kind of makes it this hermetically sealed, very special, entirely visual and crafted experience that Labyrinth doesn't quite meet in the same way.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that was a choice. It was a choice because this movie wasn't as successful as Henson wanted it to be, and the main criticisms were the darkness and the thinness of the story. So he ignored those aspects of criticism, kept a fairly thin story in Labyrinth, and kept it fairly dark, and just added humans and comedy to them. Hence Terry Jones getting the screenplay ultimately and trying to bring some humor into it. And then Labyrinth ultimately made less money than Dark Crystal in its initial theatrical run, but I think actually Labyrinth is probably better remembered now than Dark Crystal is in a general way.
Probably.
Just because of the Bowie
because of
and
the
pants.
songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're great songs. It's a great soundtrack. Trevor Jones, who scored this film, also scored Labyrinth and did another fantastic job in a totally different way on that film. Yeah, so anyway, this is The Dark Crystal. This is 1982, co-directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. The one-sentence synopsis is, on another planet in the distant past, a Gelfling embarks on a quest to find the missing shard of a magical crystal, so to restore order to his world. What has happened, the general plot of the movie is there are the bad guys, which are the Skeksis. They're these evil vulture-looking, like, they look evil. They just look like an embodiment of evil. They're cackling, they're fighting each other, they're fighting for power. That's all they're trying to do. The whole movie is they're trying to stay in power.
Sharp, jagged edges.
Yes, very angular. Then literal counterparts to the Skeksis are the Mystics, or the urRu, which is, again, that's the name for that species that is never said in the movie and is a huge part of, like, all the lore in that book is the urRu. And then Skeksis are technically, and there's the urRu and the Skeksis, and the beings at the end are actually called urskeks, the being that they divided from. So anyway, there's the Skeksis, and then there's the Mystics, who are peaceful, and there is Jen the Gelfling, who is given a hero's quest to restore the Dark Crystal to its full power by reuniting it with the shard that had been broken out of it 1,000 years prior during the last great conjunction of the planet's 3 suns. Along his quest, he meets a girl Gelfling, which he didn't know that there were any more Gelflings left. So he finds a female counterpart. He meets Agra, who is a kind of a witch, kind of a seer character. You know, very much the, you know, if Obi-Wan was very cranky, like that kind of a character.
Yeah.
And it's the story of how Jen, the main Gelfling, then fights through adversity, eventually reunites the shard with the crystal. The Skeksis and the Mystics come together into their original form, and they tell Jen, make your world in this crystal's light, and they go. And it is a pretty, thin fantasy story, but that's not the draw of the movie. The draw of the movie is the fact that this is a completely crafted world. It feels very, very complete. Jim Henson wanted to make a movie that had no people in it. He wanted to make a movie that was only puppets and only designed the entire time. And that is mostly what came out. If you were watching closely, you would notice that there are some shots that are absolutely a person in a little suit from very far away that are doing these like running shots. But there are no human characters in the movie. And I think it was the first live action film that wasn't a documentary that featured no human characters. And maybe is still, I was reading, there was a piece of trivia I read that said the only other one is the Jon Favreau Lion King, but I don't think that qualifies as a live action movie.
That's a debate for the ages.
Yeah.
what that movie is.
Yeah, I don't think that qualifies as a live action movie. So yeah, we're going to talk about the movie. We're going to talk about some behind the scenes info. We're not going to really dissect the plot. We're going to talk about how the movie came to be and some of the personnel.
I had a random thought. Are there any humans in Milo and Otis?
That is a good question.
I don't remember.
Oh boy.
Not important, but
no, but that's a super good question because that's not a documentary. I'm looking on IMDb and seeing if there's credited cast. There are 2 credited. Oh no, that's the dog and that's the cat. Yeah, Dudley Moore's the narrator. That's possible. It's possible. Right. That's the second one. That's 1986.
Cool.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
Would not have occurred to me. But the other thing about the Dark Crystal is because it's such a cult movie and because it's been so well published, well studied, and well documented, we are just kind of giving a really broad overview. I pulled some background info from various sources, both stuff that I've just kind of absorbed from my lifetime of reading about this movie, Wikipedia, IMDb. There's also a fantastic series of videos by the YouTube channel Defunctland, which is a fantastic YouTube channel that I highly recommend in general. But Defunctland had a 6-part series that they did called Defunct TV Jim Henson, and it actually covers like Jim Henson's TV career top to bottom in a series of about half an hour little videos. And there's some really interesting info about Dark Crystal and Labyrinth within those videos as well. So, yeah, I guess, should I get into the background
Yeah.
of this movie?
Just like,
Or do you have
it's
other
so
thoughts?
weird. Well, when you go into that, like I sent you like some visuals and stuff
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use, but like to me, it feels like if I were to have shown like somebody Jurassic Park for the first time and they were like sending me stuff on it, I'm like, or Star Wars. It's like, that's like kind of like how out of my like element and depth I feel, where I'm like, you probably have like better ones to like show.
No, like I'm glad you put these together because I don't have any of this kind of stuff. And, you know, like a lot of the stuff about the movie is just kind of battering around in my brain and isn't so much on paper, but I did compile some stuff. I maybe learned another couple things. So Henson first kind of had the idea for the movie as a broad concept after he saw an illustration by Leonard B. Luba in a 1975 edition of Lewis Carroll's poetry, and the illustration showed crocodiles living in a palace and wearing elaborate robes and jewelry.
Oh.
So that was kind of the first visual inspiration for what eventually became the Skeksis. He actively wanted the film to be a dark movie for children, similar to the original Grimm's fairy tales, feeling that it was unhealthy for children to never be afraid. And I actually think that this movie winds up riding that line really well. I don't think this is too dark to show little children. I do think it's scary, but I saw this when I was really young. And even watching it now, I didn't, you know, maybe you as a father of young children can tell me how you feel about that. But
no, I would definitely, of all the movies we've watched so far this year, this is probably the one I would show them.
yeah,
Definitely
there's
before,
nothing,
anything else.
yeah, it's no worse than any Star Wars movie for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the themes are all very,
Yeah, it's kind
all
of
very
like,
positive themes.
yeah.
It's all very conscious of the earth in a way, in a big way, and kind of different phases of consciousness and blah blah blah. Those things are kind of subtext within. I'm sorry, you had another point you're making.
No, I was just gonna say, like, it's mostly like if you took like all of like the Dagobah and Empire Strikes Back and like Jabba's palace, like it's no darker than like if you were to like show them all of that.
Right, totally. So Jim first brought the idea to Lou Grade, who had been producing the Muppet Show. Lou Grade was actually the producer in England responsible for being the first person to finance the Muppet Show. Jim had been trying to get a primetime Muppet television show on the air for several years, and no networks would take it. Nobody would finance it until Lou Grade financed it and distributed it through his company, ITC. Later, Henson first wrote a story treatment called The Crystal while he was snowed in at an airport hotel. The initial draft differed in a lot of ways from the final film, but did include most of the key concepts, including 3 races, the quest, the crystal, 2 Gelfling characters, and the reunification of the crystal. Early drafts of the script actually featured Jen and Kira traveling through the underworld, where they encountered a race of underground mining creatures. That concept was later turned into Fraggle Rock. That whole thing was taken out, and the idea of little minor Muppets just became Fraggle Rock as a separate thing. And Frank Oz was kind of key in developing this along with Jim in a tertiary kind of way, not directly influencing design or story, but was very much part of the directing aspect, which I'll get to. But it was Frank's idea for Kira to have a pet, Fizzgig, similar to Miss Piggy's dog, Fufu, who had recently been added to the Muppet Show at that time. And that was something he had to apparently push. Apparently Jim was resistant to the idea of Fizzgig, which is one of my favorite little things in the movie.
Yeah, I can tell you it's definitely Sarah's favorite thing in the movie.
That's awesome. There's one picture here that I will show. I'll show this one first. This is on number 4, and this has some Star Wars stuff in it.
Yeah.
So this is a picture on the left is Jim Henson. I can't remember that woman's name. Do you know the woman's name?
Oh.
Is it Catherine? I don't remember who that is. I'm very sorry because I just read who this person was because I just read that Empire book by J.W. Rinsler. But then we have Frank Oz, director of The Empire Strikes Back, Irvin Kershner, and Stuart Freeborn on the end, creator of Yoda and all of, like, a lot of the creatures and stuff in Return of the Jedi. And like Empire and Jedi was Stuart Freeborn's creature and puppetry department. And
it's weird, like those 3 guys, like right there, because I've always heard that like Yoda himself was kind of like based a little bit off of Stuart Freeborn himself. And also, like, to a certain extent, Irvin Kershner was kind of thrown in there.
Totally.
And then you got like Frank Oz, the guy who played him. So like all of right there, you've got Yoda. Like complete.
Yeah, totally. I love this photo, and Henson's got like an early Skeksis head on his hand, just as kind of a demonstration thing. And on the left and on the right of the picture, the picture on the right side here, that's producer Gary Kurtz, who we know because Gary produced all of George Lucas's films up through Empire. At which point, after Empire, Lucas dismissed Kurtz from Lucasfilm, and then Kurtz immediately went to go produce this film. And that's just a really cool photo of Frank Oz, Jim Henson, and Gary Kurtz.
Yeah.
But
you see how massive that set was.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, we'll talk about the sets. I want to talk about a couple sets in particular. I don't know if you have a picture of one of them, but if you don't, I'll find one. But Frank Oz partially took the job as Yoda to get a better grip of the realities of directing a large-scale motion picture, because that was something that was still unfamiliar to him at that point. And so he wanted to get more of that experience under his belt, or just observe that. So that was another part of the reason he took the job doing Yoda on Empire, in addition to lending his puppetry expertise to just bring the character to life. And although Henson Studios didn't work on Empire, they definitely were consulting with Jim Henson all along the way in the creation of that character, because George Lucas kind of knew that if Yoda didn't work, that movie doesn't work. So why wouldn't you talk to Jim Henson about that? So that's that. I love all that info. I love all that so much. I love that this was the first thing that Gary Kurtz did, like immediately following the departure from Lucasfilm.
Which, like, that whole story is fresh in your mind.
Yeah, I just read all that. How Empire went so over budget that they brought in other people and kind of dismissed Gary. But the thing is about that, Gary was right the whole time. He was he was letting the movie go over budget because he's like, look, no, it just has to be this good. This is how much that costs, and we know we'll make it back. And they fucking punished him for it, and it's not fair. Anyway, moving on. The film was primarily shot in Elstree Studios in mid-1981. That was the main production period. Some exteriors were also shot in England. Here's an interesting thing. The Skeksis originally spoke their own language, which was created for the film. The first cut of this movie had longer scenes with the Skeksis. And the Skeksis spoke their own language, which I can't recall if it was actually subtitled or not. I want to say it probably was, but that may have been something that Jim had to be talked into or something like that. I think he wanted it to be this like very impenetrable, just like experiential kind of thing. And the first cut of the movie had these longer scenes where the Skeksis were speaking their own language. Gary Kurtz said that the language was conceived by author Alan Garner, who based it on ancient Egyptian, while the screenwriter David Odell said he created it and that it was formed from Indo-European roots. That would all be redubbed after a particularly bad test screening. There's a lot of good information about the intricacies of these puppets and these creatures online. I'll see if did you send one that had like a good empty Skeksis somewhere?
I don't know, but that's an interesting thought. With, like, you gave me that tidbit last week off air about the their own language, and that test screenings didn't go well, and that it had to be redubbed. And I'm like, that's hearing that now. I'm like, that's very interesting. The idea of redubbing with English, because like, how were they going to be sure that the actual English words were going to like match with what the puppeteering had to do?
Right. So the dubbing, and if you watch it knowing that, you will see times where it cuts away, kind of like you can tell they're cut, but there's a lot of stuff where it works surprisingly well. And by the way, should you ever be curious, I don't know, you, Travis, or other denizens of the internet, there is a bootleg copy of a black and white early version of the Dark Crystal floating around with those scenes intact. And those scenes with the original language are on like every DVD Blu-ray edition of the movie. Like, you can watch those scenes. They're super interesting. So here's, I'll put up this is BTS 1 that you sent, Trav. That's got some really fantastic detail in this. I love these photos. Hang on, I'm trying to bring it up full size for myself so I can analyze it a little bit more. So on the left we have the crystal chamber, and there's a lot of technicians getting stuff together in there. You can see there's a performer standing in partial hull, because these stages were all built on platforms so puppeteers could get underneath them for various things. You can see how many people on the right picture here were required to just operate 2 Skeksis. Each Skeksis suit required a main performer whose arm would be extended over his or her head in order to operate the creature's facial movements, while the other arm operated its left hand. Another performer would operate the Skeksis' right arm. A team of 4 technicians operated the hand and face animatronics, and the Skeksis performers compensated for their lack of vision by having a monitor tied to their chest. The Chamberlain Skeksis in particular was built with 21 electronic components. And I lifted all that text verbatim off of Wikipedia, and I'm sorry, but that's all a lot of very specific stuff.
Yeah.
So it was an arduous task bringing all this stuff to life. You have this other picture too of the guy in the Landstrider suit. Those Landstriders are amazing. Those are, gymnasts. Those are gymnast performers on stilts in these costumes where I don't think they can see.
Yeah, they'd probably have to look straight down.
Right? Like, maybe there's because what it is, it's like the head is it's like the Wheelers in Return to Oz, right?
I mean, yeah, looking at that, I'm like, I'm sure like some of these guys played Wheelers.
Yeah.
Return to Oz.
They must have. But that work, I love that. Those scenes are so weird looking. There's a great moment where Fizzgig jumps up onto the Landstrider with Kira, and if you watch it, you can kind of tell like someone just tossed the Fizzgig puppet up there.
Yes, exactly.
And you just kind of wonder how many times they had to toss Fizzgig before he landed. And like, I also noticed that shot cuts almost immediately as Fizzgig lands, so maybe it was even like not even a very good land.
Didn't even get it complete.
And the
throwing some like Velcro on him, and then
that could have been. And the picture on the right here, you see Jim Henson performing Jen, and who's performing Kira? Do you have that on hand?
I do not.
Okay, I forget that woman's name. But I can get there because we're on the
Catherine Mullen.
Yeah, Catherine Mullen. That's correct. You can see them like doing very bad things to their necks, struggling to see their monitor, their video monitor. I'll show that.
At least there's only 2 people there.
Yeah.
And the photo and like what you talked about the Skeksis, it's
there's like 9 people in this pit.
Yeah, well, like 9 people all like struggling for space and trying to do a job. And that job is we are creating one singular character with one singular performance that we're trying to like sync up. Right.
It's an unbelievable feat. The fact that the performances work is truly astounding. They're all so good. It's obvious how in love with this movie I am. I got to see a 70 mil print of this a couple years ago. That was like really amazing. let's see. What's some other info behind the scenes here? The little hairy things that crawl across and that the creatures eat, that the Skeksis eat, like that when it's dessert in the dinner scene, which is a great scene. I love the dinner scene. It is just for grossness. It serves no plot function. It is just to show how evil and gross the Skeksis are. Those are just modified wind-up toy robots that go fast, and they just had fuzz and little stuff put on them, and that was it. And what a genius little thing. I don't know if you noticed this, Travis, but did you notice the scientist Skeksi? Who's called Skektek, by the way. They all have names.
I see. Yes.
But his mechanical eye was made using a TIE fighter cockpit.
Oh, very nice. Wish I had a photo of that to throw up.
Let's see, If you can find a picture of Skektek and send it to me. Oh, there's a Dark Crystal wiki. This is great.
Yeah, I also noticed, trying to find pictures and stuff, that the actual like Dark Crystal official website, it's very well put together and has a lot of photos and info.
Yeah.
And
an aspect of that, we'll get to that kind of thing. All right, here I'm still trying to get this picture up. I don't know. Heck it. It's a TIE fighter, trust me. Okay.
it's got a tie eye.
He does. Someone even did this thing. Yeah. I just can't click around and do this while I'm like trying to read these texts and do show. So yes, getting to why the website would have all that stuff. So after the film was completed and had already been test screened, Lou Grade sold ITC Entertainment to Robert Holmes à Court, who was skeptical about the film due to the darkness of the content and the poor reaction to the test screening. Basically, the film was just going to be dumped with almost no promotion and have a very small release, and Henson was very, very close to this movie and could not bear to see that happen. So he did a very George Lucas-y thing and bought the rights to the movie back from Court. And then, since then, Henson has owned all the rights to the Dark Crystal. They licensed the theatrical distribution to Universal, who distributed it theatrically, which is why there is a Universal logo at the top of the film.
I found that. I was wondering about that. I'm like, I wouldn't have known to associate this movie with that studio.
Purely
So
a distributor.
That explains that.
And it was almost Fox. But then Fox didn't want it at the last minute and went to Universal. And for home video rights, it's been licensed to Sony for all that time. So, and that's why, there have been countless, like a bunch of comic books and other world building stuff relating to the film. And of course the Netflix series, which I want to talk about like at the end of this episode. But because Henson's been able to own that and license it and develop that property, without being beholden to some film production company. And the film was actually ultimately released to a modest success, making $40 million on its $15 million budget. And just as a nice little thing, Brian Frood, the designer of the film, and puppet designer Wendy Meidner met on the set of the movie and were later married. And their son Toby would work on the prequel series, Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, with both Brian and Wendy 37 years later. So that's pretty freaking cool. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you want to... I have notes about some of the key personnel, unless you want to talk about the cast first.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, let's talk about the cast a bit.
It's kind of limited in this regard this week, based on just kind of like the nature of it. But we've got, Jim Henson, who played, Jin, High Priest, Ritual Master. I'm sure quite a few others that aren't even in the credits. Feels weird talking about like, and Jim Henson.
Yeah, I mean, from such things as
like the Muppet movie,
the Muppets, and
any Muppet movie, and I don't.
And Sesame Street, and like, I feel like it's impossible, at least in terms of American popular culture, it's impossible to be ignorant of Jim Henson. Even if you don't know his name, I feel like it's impossible to be ignorant of the work.
And we're just going to see like similar projects come up, because then we got Catherine Mullen, who was Kira, and just, you know, all the Muppet movies that you knew and loved growing up in the 80s, and Fraggle Rock and The Muppet Show. And she has an uncredited appearance in Michael Mann's Heat.
Really?
As a diner patron, yes.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the performers were all Henson Crew. And this is a totally insular Henson Crew thing. Yeah, let's hear more of the Henson Crew people. I love these people.
And then Frank Oz, who co-directed. Agra, Keeper of Secrets, Chamberlain, which that makes sense that he would like do the performing and the voice work for him as well, because I could tell that's definitely Frank Oz.
Yeah, you can hear him in there.
Sounds like Grover.
Yeah.
Parts.
And interestingly, Agra, I can't remember who dubbed Agra ultimately, but Frank Oz, like you said, played her on set. And in that bootleg early version of the movie I was telling you about, there's the on-set audio, and he's basically doing the Yoda voice for Agra as he's puppeteering her.
And then Dave Goles did a Fizz gig, General Gartham Master, and here we go again. All the Muppets, Labyrinth, as well as the most recent Jason Segel Muppet movie from 2011.
Oh, that's cool.
That movie's 10 years old now. That's weird. All right.
It is weird. Yeah. Time.
And then Steve Whitmire played the scientist, Skeksis.
Skektek.
Yeah, Skektek. All those same credits as well. You know, Muppet Christmas Carol, Muppets Most Wanted. Then we got Tim Rose, played the treasurer, and we know Tim Rose. We've talked about this is the third time we've talked about Tim Rose this year on this show.
Right, we've done 6 episodes, and Tim Rose has had something to do with 3 of them.
Yeah, because he was in Howard the Duck, and he was in Return to Oz, and now he was the treasure performer in this. And we know Tim Rose is Admiral Akbar, Salacious B. Crumb.
I always forget he has a middle initial.
Yes. The B stands for something, and I do not know what that is off the top of my head right now. Then we got Mike Quinn, who's also in this movie as a slave master, and we know him from he was in Little Shop of Horrors, and also he was in Star Wars. He played Nien Nunb in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And they brought him back to play Nien Nunb in the sequel trilogy as well.
Pretty awesome.
I recently heard an interview with Mike Quinn talking about his experiences on the Star Wars movies, as well as, his experience working at the Henson Studios in the late 70s and 80s. He was just a kid who would come over and just wanted to be part of everything. He volunteered a lot. And eventually Jim was like, I guess we should start paying this guy and putting him in projects. So he just hung around and eventually picked up gigs.
That's great. I love those stories.
Yeah. That's a majority of all the big ones. We've also got Deep Roy comes back. He's an additional performer in this, as well as Jack Purvis.
Yeah.
Who he was also in, the Star Wars movies. He was
the other half of he was Kenny Baker's comedy partner. They had a comedy troupe, and Jack Purvis was kind of only in Star Wars because Kenny demanded it, more or less.
Yes. He was originally gonna be Wicket, and
that's right.
I think he fell ill
sick
or something. Yeah, and they got little Warwick Davis to fill in.
And for more great work by by both Jack Purvis and Kenny Baker. Watch Time Bandits. That's just
Yeah.
watch Time Bandits all the time. That's just a good
Yeah,
recommendation.
that's a movie that like I've thought about recently. I'm like, should we do that on this show?
I would love Time Bandits. I mean, yes, let's do Time Bandits sometime. I would love to talk about Gilliam. Yeah, I would assume that Deep Roy and Jack Purvis were in some of those very long wide shots of the full suit performers of Jen and Kira running around.
That would absolutely make sense because, like you brought up last week, Deep Roy was the faraway double for Yoda,
Right.
on Dagobah. So
I think, and and I don't think they would ever admit to this, but I do think that there are some shots that Jen is played by a child in a costume, and not a little person. And I think that's actually really obvious. And there's a really great like of the time making of documentary of Dark Crystal that's again like on all the home video releases of the film. But you can kind of plainly see it's like a kid in a Jen suit, and for that to not be talked about anywhere, you got to wonder like how they were treating the children on the movie. But
interesting.
I might be totally making stuff up too. There may have been no children involved. Yeah. Was that all you had on the cast?
Yeah, pretty much.
All
we
right.
can also get into we talked about the cast and need to do our Trek connections.
Oh yeah.
Because
And you people, you're all astronauts on some kind of Star Trek.
and it was a stretch this week because
Oh good. I saw this picture. I'm like, please justify this for me because this is great.
because they're like our one guy, Deep Roy. I'm like, we burned him last week. What do we got? And so this is voice actor Barry Dennen, who looks like he's credited as the voice of the Chamberlain, which is interesting because I swore that was Frank Oz, as well as Podling. And he was not in any Star Trek movie or shows, but he did do voices in Star Trek Hidden Evil, Armada 2, and Bridge Commander.
Nice.
So our first Star Trek connection for video games.
I think way to go deep with that one.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I can't use Deep Roy again. So I used the time when you were talking about the cast to pick up this picture, this comparison picture with the TIE fighter and the scientist's eye. I sent it to you in the Zoom chat if you want to take a look for yourself. But you can see here, it's embedded. It is his mechanical eye. It is literally just a TIE fighter toy with the rings, with the wings torn off and a bolt added onto the back of one of the ends, and with a little light bulb inside. So that's some pretty fun little stuff.
Oh, if I ever lose my eye, that's what I want to do.
Just replace it with a TIE fighter cockpit. I think that's a great idea.
That or the Charles Dance thing in Last Action Hero.
You just have an assortment of different villainous eyeballs.
Yeah,
that's a great idea too. Charles Dance is so great in that movie. I recently rewatched that. No regrets. By the 4K. Very good.
Oh yeah.
It's a great 4K release. So I'll talk about a little bit of the personnel. Jim Henson, obviously. And like we said, Frank Oz was the co-director, and outside of his work with Star Wars and the Muppets, which is not inconsiderable, that is his contributions to American pop culture there are that would be enough by itself.
Oh, yeah.
But we also have Frank Oz to thank for directing the 1986 musical film adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors, and also Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, What About Bob, and Bowfinger, among others. And I truly feel What About Bob? Bowfinger is one of the funniest movies ever made. It's one of the best movies about Hollywood ever made, period. And I also think What About Bob is one of the funniest movies of the 90s. That movie's unbelievable. Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss and What About Bob is incredible.
Yeah. What About Bob is one of those movies that I think falls into a particular genre of comedies. And Clifford is the same way, where like one person's life is being torn to shambles by somebody else, and nobody else around really sees or cares.
Yes.
But in all those instances, it would be like really uncomfortable if like the person that is being tortured is a nice person, but like both Charles Grodin and Richard Dreyfuss are both dicks, so you don't really care.
No, it is true. And there's there's another movie that's like that I was just about to ask if you'd ever seen. I was excited about it. Now it's slipped my mind entirely. Dang. Where someone's insane and the other one's not. I'll figure it out eventually. Oh no, that's really bothering me.
Oh no.
Oh, it's a really good movie too. Dang it. Yeah.
Well, it'll come to you.
I
here in
hope.
just a little bit.
Yeah, because I think Neighbors. Have you ever seen Neighbors?
Yes.
With John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd.
Nope. I'm thinking of the wrong Neighbors.
Yeah, no, you've seen the Seth Rogen Neighbors.
Yes.
Okay, so it's rentable on like Amazon and Apple TV and stuff, but Neighbors 1981, starring Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, and it was written to be like, you can kind of guess, right, by that cast and by that title. It's like, and by what we're talking about, like, there's an insane neighbor who moves in next door to a normal, nice person, and the new insane neighbor makes this person's life a living hell. Yeah. And it was written and originally financed with Belushi as the insane neighbor and Aykroyd as the straight man, because that's how you would obviously... Right. But they didn't want to do that, Aykroyd and Belushi. They said they'd only do the movie if Belushi got to be the straight man and Aykroyd got to be the insane neighbor. So Aykroyd has bleached blonde hair and blue contact lenses in his eyes and is an absolutely off-the-walls insane person. It's a great, great movie. Highly recommend Neighbors. Would pair well in a triple feature with Clifford and What About Bob?
Wow.
All right, moving on. David Odell wrote the screenplay to this movie, and he was a staff writer for The Muppet Show. Jim just kind of tasked him with expanding the treatment into a full screenplay, but David Odell was responsible for a lot of stuff, contributing to various lore things, such as he's the one that gave us the final spellings of like urRu and Skeksis and urskek and like these kinds of language things. He did a lot of that in his work on the movie. We've mentioned Brian Frood, who designed the look of the movie, and really, with input from Henson, Frood's work was directly visually interpreted for the screen. I mean, much like Ralph McQuarrie's paintings look exactly like Star Wars, Brian Frood's drawings look exactly like the Dark Crystal. And this book, the World of the Dark Crystal book, is amazing. Highly recommend for the beautiful illustrations. There are many great illustrated books that Frood's put out. His first professional outing was as an illustrator of children's books, which heavily featured fantasy drawings. With a friend and artist, Alan Lee, he made a book called Fairies in 1978, which was an illustrated compendium of fairy folklore. An anthology of his work, The Land of Fraud, caught the attention of Jim Henson. And then from there, that led to this collaboration. We've mentioned Gary Kurtz, who we talked about last week also. But Gary produced American Graffiti, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and was instrumental in Lucasfilm up and through Empire Strikes Back. The movie was photographed, cinematographer Oswald Morris, who began his career in the 1950s, long career, culminating and ending with The Great Muppet Caper and The Dark Crystal, after which he retired. Some titles include The Guns of Navarone and Kubrick's Lolita. He seemed to have a tendency to shoot cinematic adaptations of stage plays and musicals. He passed in 2014, but I did learn from his obituary that his enthusiasm for the Travis, fix this for the edit this part of the podcast, please. Quote, his enthusiasm for the medium never diminished, and he became involved with the film course at Bournemouth University, where the with the local film society and festivals, and lectured with enthusiasm about his craft. So it's interesting that this guy was like a really hardworking and very prolific director of photography for about 30 years, and then spent most of his life in retirement, and
Wow.
good for him. What you mentioned earlier.
Also, shout out to the Great Muppet Caper. Just turned 40 2 days
Yay,
ago.
happy birthday, Great Muppet Caper. I mentioned earlier Trevor Jones scored this film. He would also later go on to score Labyrinth. Other titles include Excalibur, Arachnophobia, The Last of the Mohicans, Cliffhanger, G.I. Jane, if you remember, that's a real movie.
Ridley Scott.
Yep. Dark City, the Merlin miniseries with Sam Neill, and like a lot more. Trevor Jones has done great work for a lot of years. And I don't know if you caught this in the credits at the end, Travis, but Ben Burt is credited with special sound effects in this film.
Oh, no, I did not.
So, and the matte paintings were also courtesy of the ILM matte painting department. And it seemed to be matte painting personnel that all came on after Empire wrapped, but they did, the same people that did the matte work on this movie did the matte work on Return of the Jedi. So yeah, a lot of Star Wars personnel and DNA running throughout the Dark Crystal. And it shows in that it shows that it works in the way same way Star Wars works, is a world that's crafted and put onto the screen. It very much feels like it's leapt out of a brain and it lives in this world. It doesn't feel like that was the thing that George was fighting so hard for in the design of Star Wars, right? To not linger on things, to not show the huge sets, to not show all the details, to just like let it pass because this is the reality of the world, and also let it be dirty because it's lived in, and because like all these things. Dark Crystal does all that same stuff, you know. Like we get to marvel at some of the sets. Like the set that I wanted to call out particularly earlier was Agra's house and her observatory or planetarium, whatever that giant machine is.
The big reveal there.
You got to think,
Whoa.
That was a room. That was a real thing. That was a functioning giant, whatever the heck that was. That was a real thing that existed, that people built and interacted with to shoot this film. And those kinds of things I can't get over. The spectacle and the craftsmanship is unbelievable to me. And like I said to you previously, Travis, and I don't know if I have said on the show, the Netflix TV series Age of Resistance is absolutely wonderful. All of the aspects of story that aren't really that great about the film The Dark Crystal, all of that stuff is like out the window. Like all the elements of the world are very, very much there, but it's a rich, very well layered, very, very good fantasy story in the TV series.
Somebody took this world that they're like, spend so much time and effort in it. It exists. Let's use it and play in the world a little bit and actually tell a compelling story. Yeah.
And that was something that Henson Studios had been trying to do for a long time. They were for a long time shopping around a sequel called The Power of the Dark Crystal, which eventually got adapted into a 12-issue comic book miniseries, which is really good. There's a few Dark Crystal comic book series that are actually all very good. At least I like them. But that Power of the Dark Crystal actually followed the story of Jen and Kira after the events of the film, as they are old and they've kind of gotten soft in their ways and evil starts to creep back into Thra. And that'd have been very cool, but the main character is a fireling, which I don't know how you're going to bring a fireling to life with puppeteering. There would have had to have been some, computer or other animation involved there.
Yeah. I would not have been opposed to that. I think, I think the idea of taking something practical and enhancing it, with CG is like really appealing. Like,
right, which they do in the Netflix, in Age of Resistance, in the Netflix show.
Yeah, because you could have wires and bars and stuff holding things up, and you're like, let's digitally erase this.
And that's a lot of how the new series was made. But they had a lot of trouble getting financing or getting anybody really interested in putting up as much money for it as it would need. And that idea eventually kind of got put on the shelf, and they were then going around and pitching an animated Dark Crystal TV series. And they kind of just went as an animation pitch because they'd had no real hope that they could get anything else financed. They eventually had a meeting at Netflix. Netflix was interested in the show, but was not interested in it being animated at all. They knew that the magic of the Dark Crystal as something that people wanted to watch was very tied into the practical aspect of it. So they wanted to see a thing that was halfway kind of a thing where the Skeksis would be practical, but the Gelflings, being that they need to move around a lot more, would be computer animated. They produced a test that looked like this, and no one liked the way it looked. The Henson didn't really love it. Netflix didn't like it. And Netflix said, you know what? This obviously doesn't work. Here is more money to do it all with puppets. And then they worked for 4+ years on this unbelievably huge scale puppet production. The scale of it is mind boggling. And yeah, totally recommend. Do you feel that is that on your list now that you've seen the film, Travis?
Yeah, no, I definitely would like to do that. I've been hearing buzz and nothing but good things about this series for, however many years it's been available.
Yeah, a couple, 2 years. 2 years it's been out, I think. Yeah, and I kind of want to rewatch it too. I want to show it to Angela because Angela hadn't seen Dark Crystal since she was young and didn't remember it very well and hasn't seen the series. And I'd been looking for a reason to revisit it. That's the one show on Netflix I watched when it came out, at midnight. That was the one show where I stayed up and I was like, oh, I'm going to watch the first episode of the Dark Crystal show before I go to bed. So yeah, Dark Crystal. I love it. I love it a lot. I think it's a beautiful, weird little time capsule. And it's unbelievable. There's actually 10 more hours of stuff like it that's available on Netflix. You could just go watch it.
Just nothing but a dream for a long while. So when
totally.
it actually happened, it was
yeah, I mean,
surreal.
in the pantheon of things that died for 30 years and came back, there's only a handful that really, I feel fully lived up to the potential of what that should have been. I think Blade Runner got up there. I think Bill and Ted got up there. Yeah. I think this Dark Crystal series got up there as well. So yeah. I don't know if I have any.
I would put
thoughts.
the HBO Watchmen show. I think is up there as far as
yeah,
something that's I would not have thought, and that's a translation from a different medium.
Yeah,
but
totally. Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely because it is a follow up to a thing in a different medium, and it's unbelievable in its quality. You wouldn't. Yeah. It's totally And you know me, I didn't watch that show for 2 years because I was I don't care about this. I don't want another Watchmen show. But then it turned out to be one of the freaking best things on TV in years.
Yeah.
Oops. Wrong button. So yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any other thoughts on the Dark Crystal. I don't really think I do. There are many wonderful home video editions. I think there's a nice 4K that's out now. Go get the 4K. There's so much detail in this movie. There was stuff seeing this movie. I saw it in the Egyptian on 70 millimeter. So you can imagine seeing it on that screen in 70. There's just you see everything. It's just everything seems so alive the entire time. It's really wonderful. It's totally beautiful. Yeah. I don't know. You have other thoughts? Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. All looks really awesome, really good. I sent you an image of a tweet that Jurassic World had made.
Oh
today, in which they were showing off some dinosaurs, and the heads of the dinosaurs. I was immediately I swore they were Skeksis at first, and I was like, "Oh, this is a Jurassic World tweet, not a Dark Crystal tweet."
Yeah, they're not just one of those out there in the world, the Dark Crystal tweets, but this dinosaur, yeah, really does look like a Skeksi. Skeksis. That is the singular and the plural. Skeksis.
All right, good to know.
Yeah.
Also, I think my favorite of the species on there is the mystics or the urRu. From the moment you see them move and everything, I just really liked just everything about them and how lifelike and, complete they were.
Yeah.
And also those were the scenes that were really reminding me of Yoda's dojo on
Yeah.
Dagobah, are the scenes where I forget the name of the one, but he dies. And
Yeah, he's like the main guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, even before he died, I'm like, this is really reminding me of Yoda's death scene. And then he dies and he disappears, leaving his clothes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? And this
It's like
came
the
out,
same
this is a
thing.
year before Yoda would do it.
Yeah. Frank Oz telepathy, I guess. Or yeah. Yeah, there's that. And I love there's a few moments that the movie takes to illustrate that the urRu and the Skeksis are two halves of the same being. Where there's a scene where when the Emperor dies is when the Chief Mystic dies, when Jen's master dies. Yeah. And then later when one of the Skeksis is cut, a cut appears on a mystic's hand. And then when the scientist Skeksi gets knocked into the crystal chamber pit, we cut to the mystics on their trek over to the Crystal Palace, and one of them just burns up in flames. Which, as a kid, I don't think I really maybe understood, but as a kid, you just watch the things and you jam to the pod dance. It's just what you do.
Yeah.
I have the score on LP also because I just like listening to it, man. I don't have a lot of scores on record, but I have that one.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all for us with the Dark Crystal.
I think so. Look at that. A nice tidy hour.
Mm-hmm. And so next week is going to be our last week for a while, probably throughout the month of July, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
So it's, it's hard to decide what we would do because I don't know. You got stuff coming up. We've got Space Jam: A New Legacy is coming out in July.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I'm like, oh, well, we've already covered Space Jam, so we can't go back and do that to prep everybody. But what people don't realize is that Space Jam: A New Legacy is actually the final installment in a trilogy.
Is that so?
And people forget about Looney Tunes Back in Action with Brendan Fraser and Jenna Elfman.
Directed by Joe Dante, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So that's what we're tackling next week?
We're going to be doing that because it's about time we cover a Brendan Fraser movie.
That's true.
I just wish Dustin could be with us for that.
He'll be real bummed. I mean, it's possible he could be involved by next Monday.
Yeah, I guess.
It's possible. Not likely, but possible.
Yeah, but
and that is unfortunately not on any regular streaming service, but you can easily rent it on Apple TV or Amazon or Vudu or wherever. Yeah. So that'll be next Monday night. And also I want to say on the Star Wars tip, the Droids cartoon is on Disney Plus now, and it has been rescanned, and with the exception of 2 episodes, it is in proper high def, and that is kind of an insane thing for a cheaply produced Droids cartoon from 1985. So flock to Disney Plus and tell them that they did the right thing by spending the money to restore that series by giving it a stream.
So weird that it I mean, I'm glad that it's there. I just don't know why they didn't release it the same day that they put everything else up.
I wonder if it was because they were working. Yeah, no, it wouldn't even make sense, because if it was they were working on those scans or the restorations of those episodes, then why not just delay the release of all of that stuff until the thing? Because whatever. I don't. Just put more stuff in there.
Yeah.
Put more vintage Star Wars content in there. Get the episode of the Donnie and Marie show. Put that in there. Get the episode of Sesame Street that they're on. That the droids are on. Put that in there. License some stuff, Disney.
They already have the Muppet Show episode. All they have to do is just
pop it over in the collection.
Move the file. Yeah.
Copy paste. Come on, get with it, guys.
All right. So that is all for us this week. Join us next week, and we will be doing Looney Tunes Back in Action. And in the meantime, Alex, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram at Alex Brunel. Yes.
All right.
And you're doing an FCL. You want to talk about the FCL? I have a thing here.
Oh,
this is probably a promo for your first episode.
Probably.
Yeah. So this isn't the promo for what he's doing now, but tomorrow.
I did not give you the promo for tomorrow night's episode.
No.
But tomorrow night I'm going to be on First Class League, not going up against Fred Klein, but this time going up against Chris Adams in my second match as I work my way towards the FCL title.
Nice.
So tune in and see if I have to shave my mustache. And you can find me at Travis Fishburne. You can find the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, where we stream every week. Please subscribe to us on any of the podcatchers you like to listen to podcasts on. Leave us some wonderful reviews. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay smiling.